Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Foundations.
So when somebody who's calling upon God says, I'm going to sacrifice any person that comes out of my house if you will give me victory, you can't make a vow and expect God to honour that vow if that vow is contradictory to the law he's already given.
Foundations. Understanding the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. With Robbo Robinson and Mandy Warby.
Making rash decisions is a common human failing. We've all been guilty of it. We run headlong into something without thinking it through. And there are plenty of examples in the Bible of people doing similar things, making rash decisions with devastating consequences. One of the things God takes very seriously is making vows, especially making vows to Him.
He does, actually. And on that thought... Did you ever watch Seinfeld? It's got nothing to do with God, I've got to say. But did you ever watch the program?
I love Seinfeld.
You're one of these people who think it's the funniest show on television. See, I didn't get Seinfeld. One of my boys, they would laugh uproariously at Seinfeld, and I'd go, yeah, I don't get the humour here. But there was a particular, you might remember this one, about the guy who had a soup shop in New York.
The soup Nazi.
The soup Nazi, yes. Yeah. Not very politically correct to say that. But anyway, and how if he was upset with someone, because a grumpy guy, he'd get upset with somebody and he'd say, no soup for you, and he'd send them away. Yeah. Well, that was based on a real restaurant in New York.
Oh, wow.
And the restaurateur was an Iranian man, and he would be like that. He'd, no soup for you, and send people away. That is actually very much Middle Eastern culture. And it was like you get cranky over something, you'd have this rash response, make some vow, and then,
regret it.
then regret it later. Yeah. But that's actually very, very culturally the way of society in Middle Eastern culture, going all the way back to the Bible. So that's episode, now was based on a real restaurateur in New York City. And of course, if you were one of these people who made this very rash vow, you might say something like, Corban, what I would eat with you, or Corban be my legs that would walk with you, or Corban be my mouth that would speak with you. Corban means dedicated. It means something sacred that has been offered to God, and it implies something is to be committed or dedicated or offered as a gift. An offering to God, and it usually via the temple service. And of course, if somebody says, well, Corban, what I would eat with you, what they're actually saying is that the food that I was going to share with you, I'm now not going to share that with you because it's dedicated to God, and I can't give it to you now. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would then be obligated to take that portion of food and offer it in the temple. It just means that for a particular time period, they can't give you that food anymore. I have to let it here be dedicated to God. Because if it's food, it's going to sit there and go rotten, and then it will be thrown out. Okay, so that's what Corban means. It means dedicated. And you mentioned that there are places in the Bible of people making rash decisions. One of those, you would be familiar with this story, is that of Jephthah. Remember the story of Jephthah?
Yeah, it's a tragic story, really, isn't it?
Horrible story.
We read about that in Judges. So Judges 11, verses 30 and 31 says, Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering.
And what came out the man's door when he got home?
His little girl.
Oh, I mean, what did he think was going to come out of the door of his house?
I don't know what he was expecting.
I mean, it's not like he was expecting the cow from the paddock to walk out of his front door. Yeah. I mean, he obviously wasn't thinking. And, there are detractors of the Bible who hear this story or find out about this story and say, see, what kind of a God would expect that? Well, God didn't expect that because God never sanctioned human sacrifice. He was appalled by it, opposed to it. So when somebody who's calling upon God says, I'm going to sacrifice any person that comes out of my house if you will give me victory, well, God didn't ask him to do that because you can't make a vow and expect God to honour that vow if that vow actually is contradictory to the law he's already given. Now, he did actually get a victory, and his daughter comes out of the house, and And he's all heartbroken.
Yeah, of course, he realised he had made a rash decision, but at that point, I guess he felt it was too late.
Well, here's the interesting thing, is that God actually, in his law, where he actually says, if you make a vow, it's sacred, you have to follow through with it, he also then goes on and says, now, if you happen to make a rash vow, then it's like paying a fine. You pay a penalty for making such a foolish thing, but you can actually get out of the vow. So in my way of thinking, I'm thinking, what? Paying a fine was too much to ransom or redeem your daughter's life? I find that a real struggle to sort of get my head around that. What was Jephthah thinking? But then there's also another vow that happened as well, and this was with Joshua, and Joshua was a very godly man, and it's in Joshua chapter 9, and this is when the Gibeonites, they were living in the land of Canaan, and they had heard what happened to the cities of Jericho and Ai when the children of Israel were coming in and how they were conquered. And so what they thought they'd do, they thought they'd be sneaky. They sent a delegation to have a visit with Joshua, seeking an oath or a promise, a commitment to not attack them or hurt them. And they dressed up like they were in rags and all their food was mouldy. They'd been travelling from a long distance. And Joshua just took them at face value and said, no, you've got my word, we will not come against you at all. And later on, he found out that they were actually part of the Canaanite peoples that he was supposed to wipe out. But he kept his vow. What he should have done is he should have gone and said, oh, thank you for coming to visit me. I'm going to go and seek the Lord to see whether or not I should make this agreement with you. And he didn't. And the people of Israel actually lived with the consequences of the Gibeonites for centuries. So it's actually really, really important that when we make vows that are actually in accordance with the Word of God. But then you have to ask the question, are we actually required to make vows? And we can only sort of look at it from post-Christ days, not, before, not pre-Christ days. And actually we will actually take a look at this in the next episode, because we actually should not make vows at all. That can be a little bit hard for us to get our head around. In fact, the only time we should actually make vows is our wedding vows. I want to read this particular verse for you with regard to the vows or making vows. This is what God said in Numbers chapter 30 and verse 2. He said, if a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. So again, God is saying if you make a vow and you're making it in the name of the Lord, you are obligated to keep that vow. Jephthah made a terrible vow. He kept that vow, although he should have used the law of God to get out of that vow. Joshua, he made a vow. He kept the vow, although he shouldn't have actually made the vow in the first place, and then lived with the consequences of it. We don't tend to think of the consequences of our actions. We just blow up. We just make some rash decision, and then we live with the fallout, and so do the people around us. We need to be a little bit more careful. And what had happened is that throughout the centuries, there had been long, lengthy debate between the rabbis about how binding these vows were or were not. And there were many who thought it doesn't matter what the vow is. If you make a vow before God, you have to keep it. That was the mindset that Jephthah had. But then there were those who recognised that God had given a legal way out. No, if you make a vow that actually contravenes or causes you to sin by disobeying God's law, then that's not a vow that should be considered legitimate. And then you have to pay a penalty or whatever it is to get out of that vow. But what that would do was teach you not to be rash with your reactions, but to think and be rational and thoughtful and think, what is God's What is God's law here, and what does he want from me in this situation?
Yeah, so we feel the effects of the consequence of our rash vow, and then obviously God does provide that loophole.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It's good to see. Well, in the next program, we're going to take a look at what Jesus thought about the subject of Corban and some of his teaching. That's next time on Foundations.
This has been Foundations, a look at the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. For study notes, resources and more, see vision.org.au/foundations.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.